Halfway trust is far more dangerous to your soul than having no trust at all. No trust at least knows exactly what it is, and it never pretends to be anything else. But halfway trust looks in the mirror every single morning and calls itself complete faith. You pray and you serve and you show up and you genuinely love God, but there is a room inside of you that He has never once been allowed to enter. You call that room wisdom, or discernment, or simply being responsible with your own life. Here is the sentence I need you to sit with before we go one step further. I have been calling my halfway trust complete trust for years. If that sentence landed somewhere real, hold on to exactly how it feels right now. Because 6 things happen inside a person whose trust in God is only partial. The title promised you what happens when you trust God completely, and that is exactly where this ends. But you will never see the 6 things complete trust gives you until you see what halfway trust took. So stay to the end, because the closing is where all 6 of them finally become one. Your prayers turn into negotiations. A man sits at his desk with his head bowed and his eyes closed. He is asking God to move in a situation that has kept him awake for weeks. He means every word of it, and the ache in his chest is completely real. But his banking app is already open in another tab behind his prayer. The numbers are sitting there, waiting, in case the answer takes too long. He is not praying to surrender the situation, he is praying to secure it. That is the first thing that quietly breaks when your trust is only partial. The prayer stops being a surrender, and it becomes a term sheet instead. You bring God your request, but you bring your leverage right along with it. You are not asking, you are proposing, and every proposal has a walkaway point. The words sound like worship, but the posture underneath them is a negotiation. You tell God what you want, then you quietly tell Him what you will accept. How many of your prayers this month had a backup plan attached before the amen? How many times did you say your will be done while your other tabs stayed open? A negotiation always assumes both sides still have something left to trade. But the terms between you and God were already settled at a cross 2,000 years ago. Jesus did not negotiate with the Father in that garden. He surrendered to Him. He handed over the one thing you keep holding back, which was His own outcome. Then He rose on the 3rd day with every term of that agreement fulfilled. There is nothing left for you to bargain with because He already paid your side, and there is nothing left for Him to owe you because He already gave you everything. When you trust Him completely, your prayers stop being deals and start being surrender. Your obedience gets a delay built into it. A woman has known for 2 full years what she is supposed to do. She knew it the first time she heard it, and she has never once forgotten. She has prayed about it, journaled about it, and asked 3 friends to confirm it. Every confirmation came back the same, and she still has not moved an inch. She is simply waiting for a better season, a clearer sign, a safer moment. That is the second thing that breaks when your trust is only partial. Obedience stops being something you perform and becomes something you schedule. You do not say no to God, because saying no would force you to face yourself. Instead, you say later, and later is the most respectable form of no there is. A delay lets you keep the identity of an obedient person without the cost of obedience. And the longer the delay runs, the more spiritual the language around it becomes. Name the thing you are calling God's timing that is actually your fear. You have been calling it discernment, but discernment does not need 2 years and 3 witnesses. Delay is not neutral, because every year you wait is a year the enemy keeps. But the stone moved on the 3rd day, exactly when He said that it would. Not the 4th day, not a better season, not once the disciples felt more ready. He said 3 days, and it was 3 days, because God does not miss His own timing. Which means the delay in your life was never His, and it was never from Him. The tomb opened on schedule, and it proved that His word and His clock agree. When you trust Him completely, obedience stops having a snooze button built into it. Stay in this list, because the 3rd one is the one your church will praise you for. Your peace becomes a performance. A woman sits in her car in a parking lot with her hands shaking. She has just received news that has knocked the wind straight out of her chest. She opens her phone and types the words "God has got this" under a friend's post. Then she sits back in that silent car and she does not feel a single thing she typed. That is the 3rd thing that breaks when your trust is only partial. Peace stops being a fruit that grows in you and becomes a costume you maintain. Every conversation becomes a small stage where the composed version of you appears. You do not have peace, you perform peace, and the performance never gets to rest. And the more convincing the costume gets, the more alone you actually become. Because nobody comforts a person who looks like they are already fine. Count how many people know your actual struggle right now. Then count how many people know the version of it that you posted. If those two numbers are not close, you are wearing something instead of carrying something. You have been calling it faith, but a costume is not a fruit, and it never was. But Jesus was stripped and mocked in public with nothing left to protect him. He did not maintain composure on that cross, because he was not performing anything. He cried out loudly enough that everyone standing there heard the whole thing. And then he rose anyway, on the third day, with all of it still true. Your composure was never the thing holding your salvation together for a single second. When you trust him completely, your peace stops being a performance and becomes a place to rest. Your worship turns into maintenance. A worship leader stands on a stage with her hands lifted and her eyes closed. She has sung this exact bridge at least 400 times in her life. She is chasing something specific tonight, and she knows precisely what it is. She is chasing the feeling she had at 17 at a camp in the summer. She has been trying to get back to that room ever since. That is the fourth thing that breaks when your trust is only partial. The song stops being an offering and becomes a regulator for your emotions. You do not go to worship to meet him, you go to feel level again. And God slowly becomes the side effect of a feeling you came in to get. You are not being fed, you are being medicated, and the dose keeps needing to increase. Ask yourself honestly whether you were seeking him last Sunday or seeking relief. Ask what you would do if the feeling never came back, but he was still there. If that question makes you uncomfortable, then you already know the answer to it. You have been calling it worship, but you were treating his presence like a prescription. But the tomb was empty on a morning when absolutely nobody felt anything at all. The women walked there in grief, in exhaustion, with no worship in them whatsoever. They were not lifting their hands, and they were not chasing a spike of emotion. They came to care for a corpse, and the stone was already rolled away. It was true before they felt it, and it stayed true while they were still confused. When you trust him completely, your worship stops managing you and starts meeting him. Hold through the next one, because it is the one you have never once suspected. Your fear gets rebranded as wisdom. A man sits across from his wife at the kitchen table late at night. He is explaining, patiently and gently, why the safe decision is the spiritual one. He uses the word stewardship, and he means it, and it lands well. Every sentence he says is technically true, and every sentence is a wall. That is the fifth thing that breaks when your trust is only partial. Cowardice acquires vocabulary, and the moment it does, it stops looking like cowardice. Fear learns to speak fluent Christian, and once it does, nobody challenges it. Wisdom and fear can produce the exact same decision on the outside. You are not being careful, you are being afraid, but the words hide it perfectly. Do not tap away here, because the closing is where these six stop being separate. Ask yourself what you would attempt this year if the outcome were completely guaranteed. Whatever just came to mind is the thing your fear has been renaming for you. You have been calling it wisdom, but wisdom has never needed this much justification. But Jesus walked directly toward the thing that was going to kill him. He knew what Friday held, and he also knew exactly what Sunday held. That knowledge did not make him careful, it made him unstoppable. And the same spirit that raised him from the grave is living inside of you. That spirit is not renting space in your chest to keep you careful and small. When you trust him completely, your fear loses the vocabulary it was hiding behind. God becomes your backup plan. A man sits in his office at 11 at night with a spreadsheet open. He has been working this plan for months, and he has thought of everything. He has contingencies, fallbacks, and a version of the model for every outcome. And now, at the very end of all of it, he finally starts to pray. But he is praying in the fourth quarter of his own strategy. That is the sixth thing that breaks when your trust is only partial. The Father gets moved to the very bottom of the list and still gets called first. But you only call on him after every other option has already been exhausted. That is not devotion. That is what people do when everything else stops working. He is not your foundation. He is your last resort with a worship song attached. Ask yourself honestly when you last brought him something that was going completely fine. Ask when you last prayed about a decision that had no crisis attached to it at all. If you cannot remember, then he is not first. He is simply your emergency contact. You have been calling him Lord while treating him like insurance. But he did not come for you in your crisis. He came for you in your absence. He came while you were still dead in it, before you ever knew you needed rescue. Then he stayed in that grave for 3 full days to prove it was never conditional. He did not rise because you finally asked well enough. He rose because he loved you first. When you trust him completely, he stops being your backup and becomes your beginning. So go back to the sentence I asked you to hold at the very start. I have been calling my halfway trust complete trust for years, because you have just watched 6 different things break inside a person who gives God half. But look at what he did with every single half that you handed him. You gave him half of your prayer, and he gave you a finished cross back. You gave him half of your obedience, and he gave you a stone that moved right on time. You gave him half of your peace, and he gave you a Savior who was mocked naked and rose anyway. You gave him half of your worship, and he gave you an empty tomb that never needed your feelings. You gave him half of your courage, and he gave you a spirit that walked straight toward a grave. You gave him half of your heart, and he gave you 3 days in the dark to prove it was never conditional. That is the exchange, and it has been sitting on the table your entire life. Complete trust is not something you generate by trying harder than you did last year. It is what happens when you finally see that he already went all in on you. He was never waiting for your certainty. He was waiting for your surrender. And the surrender is not a leap into darkness. It is a fall into a finished work. So close the other tab and stop scheduling the thing you already heard. Bring him the thing that is going fine, and bring it to him first. If this named something in you that you have been avoiding, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this reach someone who has been calling halfway trust, complete trust too. Then comment which of these 6 you recognized in yourself right now, and subscribe to this channel so the next one gets named before it costs you another year. You have been calling your halfway trust, complete trust for years, and now you cannot unsee it. He gave you all of himself while you were still holding back, and that offer is still standing.